What's up YouTube? Mark Triple Cap here. I'm bringing you a brand new video all about what to expect if you're just now getting into FPV flying. If you're about to take that next step, you've learned how to fly line of sight, you've got your own quad, and you're ready to jump into FPV, this video is for you. Let's get right into it. First I want to say FPV is amazing. Flying FPV, there's nothing like it. I am now 2 weeks into flying FPV and still got a long ways to go, but I've come so far. And it's amazing. I highly recommend it to anyone, especially a lot of you gamers. There's not a lot different in flying FPV and gaming. In gaming, you control graphics on a TV or a monitor. Basically the same thing with flying FPV, except you're flying an actual aircraft. You're flying something real, but you're still looking through a monitor or a screen. They're very similar. I highly recommend it. Let's get on to tip 1, shall we? Tip number 1, buy a decent pair of goggles. I learned this the hard way. I bought some cheap goggles, these big box things that go on my head. They're called Quantum something. I don't remember the number. It's some kind of version number or something. But I didn't feel comfortable with those goggles. I felt disoriented. It was really weird. I couldn't fly. I tried. I did try. Every time I did, I ended up crashing. They just didn't feel comfortable. They didn't feel right. So I ended up getting a new pair. I got a pair of Fat Shark Teleporter V5, and these things are amazing. I highly recommend them to all of you. If you're going to buy a pair of goggles, start off with these. They're great for beginners. You can spend, I spent $180 something for the goggles, for the camera, and a receiver that came with it. So it's not a bad deal. If you look at the prices of most of the goggles, they start around $250 to $300, and they go on up to like over $1,000. But you don't need those in the beginning. I mean, you can go ahead and spend $300-400 on a pair of nice goggles if you like. I recommend using these. It's a great deal. The only difference in this higher end goggles is mainly the screen size. I think the higher end goggles do have a few other features like DVRs and such that will record your flight through your goggles. So there's that. If you want that, then yeah, go spend $300-400. But if you just want to learn how to fly FPV, I highly recommend these V5 teleporters by Fat Shark. They're amazing. Tip number 2, hovering. It's not easy. You don't want to go out there and hover right away. We'll get to that in a few minutes, but hovering is difficult, and the main reason is because you're level and you can't really see in front of you or below you. It's really difficult. You're not going to be able to hover right away. I suggest you're doing a little bit of forward flight at a decent speed, at a comfortable speed. That way you can get the hang of flying around a little bit. I do suggest that you learn to hover eventually at some point, because it does come in handy to know how to hover. You're going to want to know how to hover for important reasons, but initially just expect that it's going to be difficult. Tip number 3. This kind of goes along with hovering. Flying slow is difficult. You can fly forward, but you don't want to go too slow. If you go too slow, you might as well be hovering, because it's the same thing. Your helicopter is going to be practically level. If you're flying slow, that means your helicopter is still going to be kind of level. The key is to find a medium. You don't want to go too fast right away, and you don't want to go too slow. But you do want to kind of go forward. You want to move at a decent speed. You don't want to go too fast. Tip number 4, it goes with the rest. Fly forward. You want to fly forward. You don't want to attempt hovering. You don't want to go too slow. You want to go at a forward direction, and you want to maneuver that way. It's a lot easier. I highly suggest you get some altitude. I know some people say don't fly too high. I say go above the tree lines where there's plenty of open space and get comfortable flying around. It's really the easiest way to understand how your quad's going to move around, how it feels, to kind of put everything together. It's really a strange feeling when you first go out there. It's not exactly what you're going to expect. Expect that. Tip number 5. It can be disorienting. When you're up above in the sky, flying this thing around, and your body is down there on the ground, 100 feet down there, and you're just flying around, sometimes you'll lose your bearings, you'll not realize which way you're going, or it can be really disorienting. This is another one of those tips where I'm telling you about something to expect. I really can't tell you how to fix the problem, but I can tell you that you might have a problem with being disoriented. Some people, they get motion sickness or they're afraid of heights. Maybe this isn't for them. Maybe it won't work for them. Just expect that. If you're one of the types of people that gets motion sickness or something, you might experience a little bit of that. When it happens, the only tip I can really tell you is to remember you're actually in the yard standing or sitting in a chair. You're not really in that aircraft flying around. Just keep that in your mind, and it kind of makes things a little better, because what you see is up in the sky. You're up in the air, you see what the drone sees, so it can be a little disorienting and a little bit of vertigo may be felt. Tip number 6, obstacles. I recently did a video where I tried flying around in my backyard. In my backyard, I don't have a whole lot of obstacles. There's kind of a lot of space, but there's a bunch of trees. There's some other homes that are behind mine. Yeah, I had a hard time kind of navigating through the trees. I did it because I wanted to try and navigate around objects. This is the main reason I attempted this flight. But I found it very difficult. I kind of had to go at a slow speed. Wait till you're a little more comfortable flying in open air. Get comfortable flying open air before you attempt it. And always stay away from people's homes, their vehicles. Try to avoid those at all times. Tip number 7, you will drift. It's inevitable. It's going to happen. I mean, no matter what. Anytime you change your direction, quad is going to continue its momentum in that direction until you adjust it with your throttle, which this is all part of throttle management. So you'll need to be careful anytime you're going around corners near other objects like houses or trees. You'll want to make sure you keep in mind that when you go around that corner, your quad is going to keep on drifting the other opposite direction. Basically what I'm saying is you're going to drift. Always be careful. Keep in mind when you're making your turns. You don't want to run into any trees. So that's tip number 7. Tip number 8 is stick scaling or rates. You'll definitely want to adjust your stick scaling to what feels good to you if you're doing rolls or flips. So that's just something to be prepared to do if you haven't yet. Before you ever attempt to do any flips or rolls, I highly suggest you look into your stick scaling and see what you should do as far as that goes. It all really depends on what flight control board you're using. I got a KK2, so they call it stick scaling. Other boards call it rates, and other boards call it other things. So keep that in mind. Tip number 9, throttle management. My throttle management was not great when I first started flying FPV. Now flying line of sight, it's different. Everything is different. When you think if you can fly line of sight, you're going to be just fine flying FPV. And theoretically, yeah, eventually you'll be okay flying FPV, but it's not quite the same. Everything's a little bit different. Everything feels different. Your throttle management is very important. One important lesson I learned about throttle management is when I'm doing maneuvers up in the sky and I want to look down, I lower my throttle to do that. Don't lower it too much. You don't ever want to throw your throttle down to 0 while you're attempting maneuvers. And the main reason for that is your quad's going to dangle for a second, then it's going to fall right out of the sky. Everything needs a little bit of throttle in order to continue the maneuvers that you're trying to do. If you're trying to flip forward or you're trying to roll and you drop your throttle, your propellers are going to stop. So if you're in the middle of a roll and your throttle's all the way down, you might continue the roll, but only because of gravity and your momentum. At some point, you're just going to start falling straight to the ground. And I learned that the hard way, so keep that in mind. Throttle management. And finally, my tip number 10, the last tip of all. This is something I'm still struggling with, even though I'm 2 weeks into the FPV, and I know what I need to do, but doing it is just so much harder. Landing is hard. Landing is very difficult. I highly recommend you practice landing. Otherwise, you're going to end up upside down, right side up. You're going to end up on your end. You're going to end up breaking something, crashing. I mean, you're going to crash. There's no doubt in that. Landing is not easy. You think it would be pretty easy. Don't think for 1 second you're going to go out there, fly around FPV, and then come land right by your feet. That's not going to happen. If you're lucky, you're going to land at least 20 feet away from you. It's just difficult. From what I've read or what I've learned recently, the trick to it is coming in as like an airplane. Like you're going to land an airplane. You come in from altitude and you come down as low as you can, kind of to the ground, and then as you get to where you want to land, you pull back and you let it come down. It's easier said than done. That's all I can tell you because I've attempted and I'm having a hard time. Hopefully I'll get it sooner or later. One thing you don't want to do, you don't want to just kind of hover straight down. You don't want to attempt that. That is not going to work. It all falls into my last few tips about hovering and flying slow. And anytime you're a helicopter, you're a quadcopter, or whatever copter you got, drone, anytime it's level, it's very difficult to fly precisely. I mean, it just is. It's just something you should expect and you should know. Landing is difficult. So guys, that's it. That's my tips for FPV beginners. Anybody who's getting ready to take that step and jump into FPV flying. These are things you want to know. Here, I'm going to recap real quick. Number 1, buy decent goggles. Number 2, hovering is not easy. Number 3, flying slow is tricky. Number 4, fly forward. Number 5, it's disorienting, vertigo. Number 6, obstacles are tricky. Number 7, you will drift. Number 8, stick scaling. Number 9, throttle management. Number 10, landing is hard. So guys, that's it. That is my list. That's my top 10 tips for FPV beginners. These are all very important things that you need to know if you're getting ready to start flying FPV. So I hope this video is helpful to some of y'all. Please take the time to like, subscribe. I'm trying to hit that 100 subscriber mark, so if you don't mind, I'd appreciate anybody who sees this to hit that subscribe button. Help me out, guys. Help me out. That's it. I'm going to wrap this up. Appreciate you watching. Caps out.